I appreciate the opportunity to come here today. I had heard that there were going to be some local people interested in Aztalan, as well as some antiquarians here today who might be interested in the work that I did here nearly a quarter century ago. And even though the work I've been doing as the state geologist has kept me quite busy, I made special arrangements to be able to come here today and tell you a little bit about the work that I did here a quarter century ago, and perhaps we can go out and see if some of the things that I observed when I was here are still to be found. It was in 1850, in the spring of 1850, when I began my field work for Antiquities of Wisconsin. My first trip was to the south, down into Kenosha and Racine counties. And then in the late part of June, I decided I would come west. And this is where I first headed. And it was on the 28th of June that I first came to Aztalan. My transportation was a wagon pulled by my horse Billy. My field assistant for that year was my young nephew, a gentleman by the name of John Hubbard. Sadly, Master Hubbard's parents had passed away, and he had come to live with us a few years earlier. And we had enrolled him in Beloit College, and it seemed like a good summer task for him to spend the summer in the field working with me. So as a 19-year-old lad, he was with us out here doing the work of my field assistant. What I would do each day is, as I was working out in the field, I had with me just a sheet of paper that I would use for my field sketches as I went along, noting distances and directions, sizes of mounds that I had encountered. And these were all folded and kept in my pocket. And every evening I would then take that information and I would make what was effectively a journal entry for that day. And these are in fact the entries that I made for Friday, June 28th when I first came here, and Saturday, June 29th. Sunday, June 30th, of course, being the Sabbath, I did not actually go out and do any work. But I did, as I will tell you later, learn a little bit more about my feelings about that mounds that day. So these are the other reference that I have. And then finally, another piece that I am able to use is my dear wife Anne, who sadly now passed away 10 years ago. But my dear wife Anne would always appreciate receiving letters from me when I was traveling. So that as many days as I could, I would write her a letter. And I would use these as well as a way of keeping track of more information. I asked actually in the first letter that I sent her that spring if she would kindly, carefully keep the details of these letters and keep the letters as my pencilings along the way so I could refer to them later. I also said that if she did not care to have that job, she could simply dispose of the letters, but fortunately she was kind enough to save them for me, so I had that as an additional resource as I did my work. So I had those three references now to look back at and to remember what I saw as I came here. And it certainly was a spectacular sight. As we look out now, we can see this all now in cultivated fields, as it has been for many years. But when I first came here, along the section line running, dividing two of the public land survey sections, section line ran fairly close to where we are here, and not far away. The southern portion was already cultivated and apparently had been for a year or two. The northern section, however, had not been cultivated and was still covered with brush. Excuse me. Still covered with brush, and was apparently undisturbed from what had been originally built hundreds and perhaps thousands of years ago. And the first thing I set about doing is actually measuring the size. For you see, what I encountered, it is now largely plowed down and hard to see the details, but what I encountered was walls on three sides that enclosed some 17 acres of land. The walls stood on an average of about 5 feet tall and an average of about 20 to 25 feet in width. interestingly, along those walls, has been described by Heyer and others, were a series of bastions, enlargements in that wall. So it was like there was a mound, similar to some of the conical mounds that we have found elsewhere, that then were connected with pieces of wall. And that is what we encountered as we came through this area. And what I said about doing, and you can see it if you look carefully at my notes, is you can see I made just little sketch maps of each of those walls, their directions and their distances between each of those bastions. The walls were composed primarily of clay, as well as some dark topsoil. There has often been mentioned the idea of something known as Aztalan brick. And it has been misinterpreted that, in fact, the walls are made of brick themselves. But certainly, as I observed here, there was no construction of brick. What I was able to determine was that the material that was described as being Aztalan brick was, in fact, a burned clay. And I believe that burning may have had to do with a ceremonial purpose as part of whatever ceremonies went on at this site, where there would be fires at the top of this wall, and that turned the clay into brick rather than something that was really a building material. There also is, quite spectacularly, up this way, a line of conical mounds, some of them being much larger than others. And how these relate to the structure of Aztalan is somewhat unknown. They may have been the same peoples. These may have been burial mounds as well. They may have been a place, for we excavated one of them and we found that there was a mold from where a post or a pole had been in it. So it could be that there actually was a pole that stuck out of this mound. We're not sure, because all we were able to find is just some remains of the wood that was down in that. What concerns me, and where I perhaps differ from others who have investigated this site, is that they have described the site as being a fort or a fortification. But I cannot believe that with walls that are only 5 feet tall, and even if they have degraded some through the centuries, I cannot believe from the mass of material that they could have been any more than a few feet taller than that when they were constructed. That would provide for the security that you would expect in a fortification. As well, there are, outside of the primary wall, there are areas that are much higher in the natural ground, as we'll see as we get up here, so that if anyone were trying to hide behind those fortification walls, there is little opportunity that they could be well protected from anyone on the higher natural ground around. So it is my belief, based on the work that I did here, that this was not in fact a fortification, but rather a ceremonial. I did some limited excavation. There were 2 of the conical mounds that I excavated. One is in the middle of what has become the road. The other was further up towards Aztalan. I think it was either the second or the third mound in a line. In the excavation, I found, again, the remains of what seemed to be a pole. So it may have been just a short piece that was buried, or it could have extended for a great distance up above the mound. There was some evidence of bone, some evidence of charcoal. In fact, there was one place they even found some sulfuret of lead, which we know does not exist in this area, but is most common down in the southwestern portion of this area. I also excavated 2 of the what I considered to be mounds, the buttresses, along the eastern wall. One of them actually being the northeast corner buttress, and the other being the 6th one down. And the sixth one down was the one that was quite interesting, because as I excavated down to ground level, I found that in fact there were two cylindrical holes that went down into the natural soil. Side by side, they were perhaps 14 or 16 inches in diameter and perhaps a foot apart. And the only thing that I've been able to think, based on the idea that these were burial mounds, that this is where a burial was done with the body being placed in a vertical position. What I did at the end of my time here was to create this map of Aztalan as I encountered it. And you can see the walls that I encountered. I did not find a wall along the riverside, as some have suggested that there was. I did find the primary walls around the outside, as well as some external, thank you sir, some external walls that I was able to document as well. And then these 4 platform mounds, one of which seems to primarily be a natural rise at that edge. And then you can see the line of conical mounds up here, this being the settlement of Aztalan that I'm sure you all came through as you came through today. I did also make a profile across the area, and I have the detail of that profile here that I made as to figure out the elevations of each of the mounds as I came across. So you're most welcome to look at this map in detail, for it is quite interesting to see what I did encounter here. I also found evidence to the north of ancient cultivation, corn hills and other indications that there was cultivation. This is where the section line ran, and we are here south of the section line. This is what was cultivated at the time. To the north had not been cultivated. Rather than standing here any further, I would like to actually walk with you up to the mounds themselves and take a look. We'll take our map along with, and we will also, if you would help me, I'm trying to remeasure where one of the walls was. And so we will take along with us a compass and a measuring tape, and we'll see what we can find. Sir, would you be kind enough to take this large map? And we will take with us a tape measure, so we can do a little measuring as we go along. And our compass. Do we need anything else? Brains and good looks? Off we go.